Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Christopher Ray Patton. Pro wrestling. We've talked about it quite a bit here on the show, kids. As you know, if you follow the 6M, you know all about it. You also know that on Tom Clark's main event, shameless plug time, we talk about wrestling all the time. But yes, we have talked about it quite a bit here on the 6M, and truth be told, the very first release of the 6M podcast, episode number 1, was actually the NWO. So there you go. Just thought I'd throw that out there to you. Back on August 18th, 2020. It's been that long. But anyway, there's a reason why that was the first episode, because we had another episode planned and something went faulty with production and I had to go back and take care of some things. It's too long of a story. But it doesn't really matter because NWO is a huge angle in pro wrestling. And if you're a wrestling fan, then you know this. And if you are a wrestling fan, then you're familiar with the business, what we call the business. You're familiar with how things work, more than likely. And then you know, especially if you're my age or a little bit younger perhaps, you know that the way the curtain has opened over the past 20, 25, 30 years is effing insane. It's nuts. There was once upon a time in this business where if you told anybody anything, it was akin to getting your leg broken by the mob. These are true stories. There's all kinds of stories out there, kids. Like if you were trained to be a wrestler, or if you were a wrestler and you told a wife or a girlfriend who was winning the match that night or whatever, and word got back around that you said something, you're done. You're done. That's how closely guarded the business was. That's how the secrets were protected. This is how they kept kayfabe. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? That's what they did, man. This is how the business was run. It was run like the mafia back in the day. That's just how it was done. Today, we're talking about one of those shows, one of those moments of pulling back the curtain. By the time Heels came out, we knew so much about pro wrestling. I don't know if Heels shed light on anything any different that anybody didn't know, with the exception of, hey, kids, here's a small town promotion. This isn't WWE. This isn't AEW. This isn't WCW. This isn't New Japan. This is nothing like maybe you know of or think you know of in the past. And trust me, from a guy who came into pro wrestling on the independent scene, in a small locker room with like 10, 15, 20 guys. And it was on the weekend. They all had full-time jobs and mouths to feed at home and probably doing construction or working at Bojangles or whatever that looks like. These real people are living real lives, kids. If you're not familiar with that stuff, then maybe this show opened your eyes to some of it. Or maybe you got that from the wrestler. Remember when I told you that it's been exposed like crazy and it's been pulled back? Case in point. But Heels maybe brought that to you, maybe not. Let's get into it here today. Heels is an American drama television series about, you guessed it, professional wrestling, created by Michael Waldron that premiered on August 15th, 2021. In November 2021, the series renewed for a second season, which premiered on July 28th, 2023. And in September 2023, if you know the story and you know what's going on, the season has been canceled. But never fear, because something may be on the way soon. More on that in a bit. The show aired on Starz. It's a fictional look into the world of pro wrestling. It does star Stephen Amell and Alexander Ludwig as brothers, Jack and Ace Spade. And it's all about the DWL, the Duffy Wrestling League. And there you go, kids. There's your lowdown on Heels. So, Chris, as we get into the show here today, you and I talked quite a bit off mic before we hit the record button. And I'm like, we got to save some of this stuff, get it on the air. What do you think about this show overall as a pro wrestling fan? By the way, are you able to watch this as a pro wrestling fan or just someone that wants to enjoy the show? Is it both? And do you enjoy this show overall?
So I really enjoyed this show and was very sad to hear about the cancellation that you kind of brought up at the beginning of the show there. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think there's some tropes that you wouldn't necessarily like to see as a wrestling fan, but for the most part, it does give you the feel of what an independent wrestling company would potentially be going through, with the different characters having, their day jobs, such as Jack Spade, who's played by Stephen Amell, as you mentioned, working as a tractor salesman in the small town of Duffy, Georgia. it it bleeds that feeling of Friday Night Lights, and I think as a big fan of Friday Night Lights, that kind of drew me to the show. Even the score kind of has that vibe to it. Now, granted, this isn't about high school kids, but Friday Night Lights was vaguely about high school kids if you watch that show. But I think there's a lot you could take away from this as a series as a whole, because there's a lot of you got tragedies that happen in some of these people's lives. You have people that are kind of stuck to die in this small town in Duffy, Georgia. And as someone from a small town in Georgia, Gainesville, Georgia, there is that sense of dread, and wrestling is kind of their escape from it. And I think, as far as watching a TV show, I related to a lot of that stuff. And as a big fan of, like I said, Friday Night Lights, it has a lot of that. And Stephen Amell, he's great. He's great in the show. Alexander Ludwig is also really good. There's some great casting throughout this. Even one that really surprised me, which is James Harrison, who's a former football player that kind of came out of nowhere. So it's just I really enjoyed the show. I think the second season kind of hit more of a stride, especially when you're talking about maybe taking a peek behind the curtain even a little further with booking decisions and trying to get out of the feud that we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, like what did you think about the show?
I enjoy it. I'm like you. I think season 2, they hit their stride. Season 1 was interesting. A lot of it's very familiar. Again, backstage, working class guys and gals, and everybody's got another life besides this. This is basically weekend warrior kind of stuff. And so a lot of it, from my perspective, really does look familiar. And a lot of it, kind of like The Wrestler. The Wrestler got a lot of stuff right as far as the backroom stuff goes, the backstage and the locker room stuff. They really did. This show does too. It's just, again, a bunch of normal Joes, a bunch of working class folks who were, just doing this because they love it. I mean, yeah, the DWL supposedly, is trying to go places, trying to sign a deal in season 2. But honestly, even if none of that happens, these folks would still be there every Saturday night. They'd still be there talking about their character and their storyline in front of however many people they can put in that building on a Saturday night. But hey, you mentioned Friday Night Lights. I have never binged that show. Is that worth getting into?
I would say specifically the first 2 seasons are definitely worth a watch. The 3rd season happened during a writer's strike, which almost caused the cancellation of that show. So it does get a little weird, but and they have some turnover on some of the actors as well. But yes, the first 2 seasons are very binge worthy, and it definitely gives you that small town type feel. The substitution, of course, being football versus professional wrestling, but you get kind of the peek behind the curtain. A la the movie Friday Night Lights or the book Friday Night Lights, or even like Varsity Blues, if you take away the goofiness, there is still a lot of that there. And I think if you take a lot of those concepts from that show or the book Friday Night Lights and apply it in a wrestling sense, that's how you get heels. The one difference, and the thing that I appreciate heels about, maybe even more so than the wrestler, is they don't lean directly into... They kind of make the hardcore element, the CZW type stuff that we saw in the wrestler, and the very sad tale that we get, kind of have in the wrestler. You get kind of the opposite in heels, where those guys are kind of looked down upon by your main stars here with Jack Spade and Ace Spade.
I don't know if I can say that's deliberate or if that's just a plot device. A lot of Stephen Amell is in this show, and I've told you that before, and it's not... I know it sounds like a criticism. I don't necessarily mean it that way, but, some stuff has come out about Amell in the past year or so that hasn't been too awesome. So, I try not to hold that against anybody unless you, hit a nun with a bus. I'm not trying to give you too much of a hard time. But, it's just, I don't know. There are certain moments of this show where other characters are speaking, and I'm like, it kind of sounds like something Stephen Amell would say. So you can kind of feel like he's interjecting himself here. So again, is that the worst thing in the world? I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world, but I can kind of, I don't know if anyone has a problem with that. I can kind of understand why they would have a problem with that. But yeah, and to your point, yeah, I mean, the stuff that we're looking at is, telling the story in the ring. Like Jack's character, or Stephen Amell's character, Jack, is like, tell the story in the ring. Like, just, we're here to tell stories. And with wrestlers who are getting fed up with him, Rooster gets fed up with him. But, to his point, these things take time. And I'm telling you, man, when you've got a locker room full of sweaty dudes who just want to go out and be a superstar, like for real, and everybody wants to be Stone Cold, not everybody can be Stone Cold. So I wrote storylines for a while behind the scenes for this company, and it was like, I would have things planned out for 6, 7, 8 shows ahead. And by show number 8, that guy's going to get his win. But in week 2, he's looking at me like I'm a monster and I'm not treating him right. And I'm thinking, dude, just hold on. We're going to get there. This takes time. So I love the idea that, again, they kind of got that right. As a pro wrestling fan, are you more down the middle when it comes to the storyline versus the hardcore stuff, or do you lean one way more than the other?
I am not a huge fan of hardcore wrestling. I was more of a fan of it as a kid, like as a young, PO'd teenager. With that kind of, you kind of draw towards like ECW and like, look at this attitude that they have towards everything. But that's also just kind of being a child of the 90s to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. But as I go through and I watch some of these later things and say like an AEW where you might have 3 or 4 matches on the card that are people just hitting each other with garbage, 5 versus 5. I do kind of find myself being like, I don't really need it. I can kind of go without it. And when I was talking about like the wrestler, for instance, you have kind of 2 veterans that get brought in throughout this show, famous names. One that just worked for the company I was talking about, CM Punk, and his lovely wife, AJ Lee, who comes into the show, and they don't get treated to the same way that you see like the older wrestler, the older vet, how he gets treated in the wrestler. So I kind of liked that take, and maybe that was more of what I was trying to get across than as far as the differences.
Punk is really good in this, by the way. Let's just be honest. I think he was really good.
I thought AJ Lee was phenomenal in her. Yeah. I guess she's only really in 2 episodes. I was hoping that we would get more as we move along here, and hopefully we still will. But specifically when you have the episode where she's kind of working with Kelly Berglund's character, Crystal Tyler, who goes from being a valet to a wrestler, and she's kind of getting schooled by the old vet a little bit. And then she sees her like just straight taking tons and tons of painkillers and just drinking mass Gatorades after their match and stuff. That was just kind of a different take of like a vet in comparison to like what they were doing on the wrestler.
Oh yeah. I mean, back in the day in the 80s, cocaine and hardcore drugs and, uppers to stay up and downers to take a nap. It's like Elvis or something. I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine because you see and hear so much through the years. But yeah, it's changed. I think I don't want to say Kenny Omega and the Bucks are the ones that changed that for the modern era. I can't say they were the ones, but I hear their names a lot brought up in those types of conversations where like Kenny's playing video games in the back. The Bucks are playing video games. They got Gatorade. Like you said, they got their feet kicked up. Some guys read a book for a match. I mean, it's, people can complain, Chris, all day long about the business isn't this anymore and it's too much of this. Dude, I'd much rather be in a locker room today than I would in 1985. I mean, honestly, man, not to mention the ribbing that would get so far out of hand. They thought it was hilarious. But you hear some of those stories today, and you're like, "My God, I don't want to be around that crap, man."
Yeah, I think that goes in both companies. I don't necessarily know that it started with Kenny and the Bucks. I mean, you heard kind of Taker talking about it even in the WWE locker room, as far as like how people go about wrestling. And I think a lot of that is the lighter travel schedule, right? Like you're not driving town to town trying to make these shows. When you look at AEW and kind of the way they lay out their shows, you don't have people on the road, 280, 300 days a year like you did when you're looking at the heyday of the 80s where, people probably did need cocaine to wrestle 2 times in one day and then drive 8 hours to, Tulsa for $300 or whatever.
Yeah. And plus, put their bodies through all that and then sit on a Greyhound or sit on a passenger plane in tight seats in third class, or it's, or even in a car, in a compact car where your knees are up to the dash and because you're 6'5" or 6'7", whatever. that takes a toll on you too. Just sitting down, like being cramped in those cars and buses and whatnot. I mean, yeah, I mean, I remember, I think it's Punk had his own bus. I think Big Show had his own bus. And it was like, well, it's not because I'm a prima donna. It's because this has saved my body. Like, everybody should have this. Everybody should have a private plane. Everybody should, it's like, that may not be feasible, of course, but like, yeah, man, taking better care of yourself in this day and age. I'm with you. I love that there was that difference there. And so, yeah, but like by comparison, we were bringing veterans to a company that we were working for, right? And similarly to what, Punk's character, like the rabies guy would be subjected to, is like everybody liked him and appreciated him, respected him. Everybody got along with him. That's how we treated vets. There was none of this, no one backstage was jealous or trying to get his autograph or, nothing creepy. Like we bring in Barbarian more than one time. And one of the first times we brought in Barbarian, we're standing there talking to him and it's like, he says, well, who's going over in the match? And I'm like, well, you are. And he says, and he just says, well, and he just makes it known that, I don't have to go over. If you want your guy to go over, that's fine. I said, no, it's not fine. You're not going to lose to a 150-pound, 18-year-old kid in this ring tonight. That's not what we do for veterans. When veterans come in from the bigger companies, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, whoever it is, they're going to get treated with respect and get treated like the veterans that they deserve to be treated as. And so those guys went over every time they came in, and they should, because we were old school guys ourselves and we believed in doing the right thing. When it comes to the backstage part of this, Chris, I mean, it really felt like they were going out of their way to give you a true glimpse of what a real locker room, like in 2023, would probably look like in a small town. I mean, to me, it felt very real. Did you appreciate the fact that they went to those lengths to portray it in that light? Or are you more like, I don't know if I want to know that kind of stuff behind the scenes. I just want to know more about what's in the ring, or where do you fall on that?
No, I mean, I think it was important stories to tell, because especially when you get into characters like Big Jim and them all showing up for the birth of his child, and like it gives you a reason to care about these people, as some of them have been friends for years. They kind of talk about that throughout the show. You kind of get some great scenes with Jack Spade and Ace Spade having to interact at church together as heel and babyface brothers. I think all of that stuff and the backstage interactions are kind of what makes the show, what makes me want to watch the show. It's kind of the emotional side of it more so than the wrestling side of it. Now, that being said, they do have some pretty decent in-ring action for what they show on the show, but don't tune into it and think you're getting Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr. or anything like that. It's not, it is definitely a show built around the lives of these characters trying to make it in a small town in the wrestling industry.
I had to say, the sound effects throw me off, man. Every time I hear them, they totally take me out of the moment. I can't help it.
Yeah, they do add a little bit of pop to a lot of their ring sounds. But hey, WWE does that sometimes too, especially if you go back and watch a pay-per-view a couple weeks later. So
that's a good point. Yeah, the punches sound like a punch out of a film, like stuntmen. It's like you picture those dudes, punching a piece of raw meat in a studio or something, like to get the sound effect right. You know what I mean?
It's like that scene in Rocky where they're watching him train, and in the background you just hear the meat thumps.
Yeah.
Hey, Champ, I think you should check this guy out.
Yeah, one of the first times I heard sound effects in the ring on this show, I think I was in the room alone. I looked around to nobody and said, "What?" Like, I had to go back and listen to it again. I'm like, man, they're really going overboard with this production, man. But all right.
It is crazy that they somehow worked in a way to talk about WCW, because they do talk about WCW in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have the evil company from up north, but they dare not mention the name WWE, which is very, very strange. I don't know if you noticed that, but there's and even in the second season, it goes even more in depth with certain names and figures. But I was kind of surprised that they have that scene with, Big Jim and Stephen Amell on top of the water tower. Jack Spade's the character, where they're talking about, you remember that time we saw Sting in WCW?
Yeah.
So they do throw little niche things out there. And there's obviously characters that are based on, some real life people, like Wild Bill Hancock. I guess you could kind of relate to a Stan Hansen or a Jake the Snake Roberts type.
Yeah. And didn't they in season 1 have a company that he was working for that was their version of WWE?
Yes, and then you get kind of the almost the same Ric Flair tell, the plain tell of just showing up with nothing but the title belt on, which is kind of how he gets demoted back to the DWL or Duffy, Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, kids, we could giggle about the Flair thing a few years ago, but since then we maybe not ought to giggle because, man, when you hear her story, it's not that pleasant. So, yeah, that's a whole other story for a whole other podcast. But I'm with you. I know the WWE stuff. They didn't go there. I'll be honest with you. I always thought that was done by design because they didn't want to run afoul of that company because WWE is very particular about their trademarks, their copyrights, what you can and can't say. And I just think maybe it was better for everybody involved if they just didn't talk about them.
And I agree, and that was why it was so weird when they started dropping WCW, because who owns all of the trademarks, the videotapes, the packaging, and everything? It's WWE, right? So it was just, that was kind of, maybe because they didn't really take a swipe at WCW or anything, whereas the WWE storyline is definitely a toy belt, which is why you get Wild Bill kind of freaking out on the plane. So they tried to tie that into an actual story angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Hey, Tom Clark here for Tom Clark's Main Event. And if you are not subscribed, you're doing life wrong. Going strong since 2014 with over 300 episodes and a variety of guests that include Randy Orton, The Big Show, Rob Van Dam, and a lot more. Check us out on all the major platforms, including YouTube at Boink Studios. Subscribe today, Tom Clark's Main Event. Before we get into the cast, we got to talk about the guy behind the scenes, Michael Waldron, who is behind the show, has worked on Rick and Morty, and he also created Loki, the series for the MCU, of course, and he wrote on Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, and Avengers Secret Wars. So this guy's got, the upcoming Secret Wars. This guy's got quite a nice little resume behind him. So, it always helps, Chris, when there's a smart guy behind the scenes with a great idea and people who believe in it that bring it to fruition. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I mean, the guys obviously worked on a ton of big-time shows. It's kind of surprising that Hill somehow managed to fit into something he would be wanting to work on.
Right.
When you start naming those shows out. But yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, anytime you can have that going into trying to sell a show, I think it goes a long way. I know that there was some, at the beginning of the show, didn't they even change the showrunners a couple of times before it ever went to Stars, if I'm remembering correctly, off of when Stephen Amell was first talking about the show and the fact it was going to come out. I actually, when they first started talking about the show, I was like, it's never going to happen. And then when they started talking about a second season of the show, I was like, I don't really see it happening, because the way they end the first season of this show kind of is like, that's the end of the show. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably maybe a part of the reason the first season's not as good as the second season is just like you're constantly having to worry about whether you're going to have to end the show on like a cliffhanger for the next season, or do we have to wrap this thing up because this might be the only season we get.
Yeah, that's fair. And we've teased it like crazy, kids. The showrunners, the folks working on Heels and are currently, as we speak, shopping it around. By the time this episode is released, for all we know, Season 3 will be on the books and Heels will be on a new network. I don't know that for sure, but that's the hope for anyone that enjoyed this show. And if you want to go binge the first 2 episodes, well, you're out of luck unless there's a way to buy it on iTunes, which I don't know if there is, because Starz has pulled the show. I didn't know that till you told me about it. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that was crazy. I had a friend whose mom was going to try to watch the second season, and he messaged me. He's like, hey, do you see this show? And I searched for it. Maybe it's back up now, but there was I guess whenever I posted that in the Discord, it was just gone, like vanished, which made me think, okay, well, potentially they sold the rights to the show. Mm-hmm. So even if no one else puts out a third season, maybe someone had bought the rights to put it on whatever streaming platform outside of Starz. Which we've seen that happen in the past.
Yeah, I looked again today and it's still not there because I was hoping to watch a couple before going into this. But we'll see what happens, kids. Stay tuned for that part.
Maybe that means the same thing as like when Edge was removed from the video packages and this thing is going to show up on HBO or...
We'll see if it gets a pop like the former Edge did in AEW.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Man, look out. This will become a wrestling show real quick because I've watched that back 20 times. It's so awesome. Not just because it's him, but I just love it when fans are happy. The next day, fans will get weird and say dumb stuff about everything. But the fans in the building who you're supposed to make happy for the night that you're in front of them, that's what matters to me. And man, that was a happy crowd that night.
I promise I will try not to make too many references to modern ongoings in wrestling, but that one was that one's just too funny because it does correlate because he was removed from all the video packages and it's like, oh, that was weird. It's the same thing with stars or with stars, right? They remove heels, so maybe they've already gotten a deal done, which that would be great.
That'd be great.
Stars canceled 4 shows. So, and 2 of them had never even seen the light of day, which is in itself is kind of surprising. Like in the can, that's how afraid of the writer's strike they were, and in the current ongoing, I guess, actors strike. But the writing strike came to an end before they canceled these shows, or I guess 3 days after they canceled these shows. So that in itself is kind of like a weird thing. And you talk more about media than I do. You've probably talked about this with other shows before, but to me, I was like, well, because all of the articles leading into it was like, well, that's probably the reason that they canceled these shows is they're worried about the writer's strike. And then for it to end like 3 days later, you're like, oh, that's maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and plus, I guess the ratings weren't what they wanted them to be. I mean, look, I'm not suggesting that these guys go make content just because it's fun. I mean, you want an ROI on anything you make. I'm not stupid. I know how money works. But, like, I mean, for streamers, Chris, who are getting bent out of shape over ratings, I mean, wow. It's I don't know. I guess there's no better metric than downloads and ratings, right? And what else can you do? But you know how many other streamers you're competing against? How many other things you're competing against? Like, sometimes it feels like a lot of these shows just don't get the proper opportunity to even succeed to begin with.
And I mean, I would point this at Stars as being like, what is their highest rated show there? I'm guessing it's Power.
Maybe, yeah.
Right. I know the show was doing like 100,000 viewers last time I looked, which sounds like not that much because when you're talking about ratings, you're talking about, the NFL or wrestling or, something that's live that's on TV. But I think I brought this up in the Discord previously. That new Daryl Dixon show, its opening was like 0.90, and that's on cable.
Ooh.
So it's kind of hard to judge what that means. I mean, Stars, if you think about, they have Minx, I believe. They have the Power series and the Power spinoffs by, the 50 Cent produced gimmicks. And then outside of that, I can't tell you another popular series on Stars. So if they were getting any kind of traction from Hills, it's kind of like, well, it makes it kind of hard to think of why they would cancel it.
I was watching Stars because of Heels, honestly. That was it for me.
But Power's a great show. I'm not crapping on Power. That is their only other show. So when you're kind of a streaming platform that doesn't really have much to offer other than here's like 2 or 3 shows, anything that has any kind of traction that might make people tune in, you would think you would want to keep. But it almost makes me wonder if that whole streaming network is going to be either being absorbed or just on the wayside out, just because there is not a whole lot of content there. And I mean, they're technically tied in with Paramount, so I don't know that they necessarily need to have a separate Paramount streaming service and Starz streaming service. I think we're starting to get into the weeds with some of these streaming services because that's the only reason I had Starz is because this show was on there.
I can't think of one I don't have. That's how far up to my neck I am in streamers, dude. I don't know of one that I don't. There's like a National Geographic or something, but I think I even got that because of the Disney bundle or whatever. But like, there's some randos here and there, but for the most part, I've got all the top ones, which is crazy.
So what you need to do is what I did just a few weeks ago. I switched banks, so they replaced all of my cards. and I just never signed up for any of them again. It's the easy way to purge everything out. I know there's sites that do this for you, but then you have to make the decision of, well, I might want to watch something. This just does it for you, because then they go to charge your card. It's no longer available.
Yeah.
And you can start over.
I would, if my job didn't entail me being online 24/7, I'd love to disconnect sometime. There's always a meme put on there. Well, go, look at the trees, smell the grass and stuff. And I'm like, being outside's overrated. Give me my artificial light. I'll just stay indoors. So.
I'm all for that, but what happens is you end up, the way that these streaming services have started to structure things, I don't know if they get a hold of each other's calendars or what, but by the time you end one, there's another one starting up, right? There's another show you want to watch on another streaming service. So you do end up with this, even if you're canceling them, you're still just signing up for another one again, right? So you're kind of in this endless rotation in the streaming world. It's still better than, paying $200 a month for cable or whatever. And I think there's benefit to that, but there is this weird rotation that we're on with streaming services in general.
Your phone is listening, kids. Bottom line, I don't care what anybody says. Your phone's listening all the time. It knows what you want to watch, and that's how they move forward. I'm telling you, I'm not a conspiracy guy by any means. Don't misunderstand me. I'm never going to be that guy, but I do think there's a lot more going on. Online don't even get me started on online privacy. We'll be here all day. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, just any kind of, if you use YouTube, they're going to come up with a profile algorithm of things to show you that you might like, right? Yeah. So you're going to get hit with any kind of, that's just the world we live in. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I do think there's way too many streaming services, especially with some of these companies. Like, this show is, like I said, produced by Paramount, but not a Paramount show, and it's on the Starz streaming platform. So, and there's already a Paramount streaming platform. So if I want to watch this and then watch, was it 1883, for instance, I have to have two separate streaming services. See, it becomes a rabbit hole. That's what I was getting into.
Yeah, and it's all TV rights. It's all rights to IP. It's the same reason why random movies, I think it's on HBO Max. They've got some Marvel stuff on HBO Max. And buddy, it's displayed pretty prominently on their page as well. Okay? Because they're like, we got Marvel stuff here, see? Which is cute. So yeah, it happens, man. It happens. We mentioned the cast here, Stephen Amell, Alexander Ludwig as your two main stars kids, Jack and Ace Spade. I can't say, Chris, that I got from day one that this was a deck of cards that we're talking about and their dad was King Spade. I'm going to be straight with you. It took me a little while to get it, and I consider myself an intelligent man, Chris. But for some reason, that went straight over my head. I'm going to be honest with you. It's the truth. I don't know why I missed that.
I just always wanted to know if their last name is actually Spade or if it's just their dad's working name. Because
I thought that too.
We start the company out with them already in the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We see some flashbacks of them as kids early on, but you never... is their last name really Spade? And if so, it makes a lot of sense, right?
It was, yeah. Well, yeah. And it was like midway point of season 1 when it hit me. I'm like, oh. And I'm like, man, I'll never tell that story. But here I am telling it. So, yeah. But it's actually pretty smart when you think about it. But look, dude, the main part about both these guys as brothers, these two are effed up. They're effed up from top to bottom because of their dad. And I find it interesting, Chris, how in season 1, their dad came off, you talk about heels, their dad came off as a heel. Their dad came off like a really, really bad guy. Season 2, brother, you talk about a redemption arc. Like their dad, I had a whole new perspective on their dad in season 2. It's amazing. I'm not suggesting this happened, but it's almost like they went into season 2 thinking, man, we got to do better than this. And he's a prick. We got to do better than this. We've got to give him a backstory. And because season 2 almost felt like a different guy, same actor, different guy, Chris. Did you get that vibe with their dad, played, by the way, by David James Elliott as Tom Spade?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a story device that they were going for, so you can kind of, when you get into the episode where Ace really lays into his brother in the center of the ring, right? You kind of have that reasoning where his brother has been the entitled one that the dad really loved, who wanted to push him as this giant football star. I mean, all of that in the way he treated Ace, lesser than, because he was not a star athlete. That's kind of where you get the prick side of the dad. But then when you get into season 2, it kind of makes sense of why he's like that. Especially when they start talking about some of the external things that are going on around that company and how much of a hassle it has become for Jack Spade. So it worked really, really well. And like I said, kind of the first season, I think there was a lot of worry that that thing might not get picked up again. So they cram a lot of stuff in that first season and then kind of go out with an ending that I think if you ended the show right there, people would have been like, that was a fun little TV miniseries.
Oh man, when they get to, and I don't want to give anything away, kids. If you've not watched the show and you have an opportunity to watch it later, I don't want to spoil too awful much. But when they get to his arc in season 2, man, it's easy for me to get emotional when I'm watching stuff. I totally got emotional in the episode. I couldn't help myself because like I didn't feel anything for the guy in season 1. I thought he was a jerk, right? And especially the way he checked out. Like, how could you do that? But, you know, I totally changed my own the character, man. I think it's important that they allowed him that because, you know, not the soapbox, but sometimes we tend to vilify people who, you know, commit suicide. And the truth is, Chris, one person knows what's in that guy's mind, what's in his heart, and it's the guy. His closest family member may not know he's struggling or she's struggling. How dare we pass judgment on people for doing that? Like, you can hate them all day, but you know, when you I don't know, part of me says it's time we begin trying to understand what leads people to go down that path instead of vilifying them automatically the day after it happens, man.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And as far as a show goes, trying to give you a little bit more into that guy's mindset, I think they did a good job of that. And they also gave you a redemption arc of one of the, I would say, probably my favorite character in the show, which we talked about a little bit, was Wild Bill Hancock, who you think is just this piss and vinegar old vet, right? Who's just wanting to take advantage. He got fired from his other job. He's just here to use this company to make whatever last bit of money he can. And the second season comes around, and it's a total different story about who he is.
Yeah, again, man, redemption arc. By the end of season 2, you love this guy, and he was uncomfortable to watch for a while because he was so good in his role. But yeah, dude, it was. I'm with you. I love this by the end, and he's good anyway. Chris Bauer as Wild Bill Hancock, kids, really good. It gives off those vibes of like a Terry Funk, like toward his later years, of a Hacksaw Jim Duggan, of those guys they've lost a step, but they can still draw a house. They can still work with anybody. They're so smart that you can't do anything in a ring they haven't seen or heard of before. Like, those guys are invaluable, man. And I think he did a fantastic job in this role, man. I can't say enough good things about him. He's awesome.
Yeah, he was kind of my standout from the entire show, and I think the only thing I had seen him in previously was True Blood as kind of the goofy sheriff, and he was great as the goofy sheriff in True Blood. So him in this role, there's some great scenes with him. Like, there's one where you actually think that maybe he's gonna commit suicide throughout the show.
Yeah.
And they dial that back, and you kind of get, like you said, the redemption story. And then some of the characters that you think have been the good guys all along, we kind of see a different side of them when we're talking about casting, which is I'm trying to Mary McCormick's character, which is Willie Day.
Yeah, good call. To me, he'll always be Duboff from Face Off. Can't help it.
Oh man, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, man. It's like, why is he mad? You had a sick sandwich with his wife and his sister. Yeah. Wow. That's By the way, Face Off's in the archives, kids. Go look it up. So, yeah, he's great, man. And you know what? You'd never know that's not his hair or his beard. You'd never know that's not him or all that. But, like, it's so good. I'll be honest with you. You got to give them props on the costuming and the wardrobe and everything. Because, man, he looked great, actually.
I like the attention to detail of him having various bolo ties throughout the show.
Yeah.
He's living in a crappy motel, but this man made sure to pack all of his bolo ties.
And he's still a ladies' man. As crude as he is, you put him in front of a woman, they just turn to jelly in front of him.
And in season 1, there's a great scene with him and Ace Spade, and he's like, that's what it is to be a heel, when they're in the bar together, and he does the 1980s keeping it kayfabe brother thing.
Yeah.
And that's a great scene.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be overstated, kids, that back in the 80s, if you got stepped up to in a bar and you didn't step back, in some instances, I mean, you got fired. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. That's just how it was. That Bill Watts in UWF Mid-South, brother, if you got your butt kicked in a bar, you lost your job the next day. Don't bother coming back. Because, again, man, they were protecting kayfabe.
Yeah, yeah. Another star that really stood out to me is Alan Maldonado, who played Rooster Robbins. And I was like, this guy could just step into any wrestling company and I think get over, honestly, especially when they get into him cutting promos. I was like, wow. This is I promised I would try not to talk about pro wrestling too much here, but he kind of has like the attitude of to me kind of came off like AR Fox. Like, I don't know if they based the character around AR Fox, but someone who has kind of been looked over and a lot of people have taken a little bit of his style over the years. That's kind of what it felt like.
Nice. I don't know if I put two and two together, but you're right. I love him in this, and it sounds like I got a butt coming. I don't necessarily have a butt coming. I do love him in this. There are moments when, and I'm not saying this is what happened, man, but there are moments when it almost feels like I have to be the upset black guy. I have to be well, let me tell you something. And I'm not trying to poke fun or anything, but there were moments when it almost felt like too much, and he's great. I'm not suggesting it's the actor by any means, but I don't know, man. There's moments when it kind of felt, I don't know, a little too much, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
I could see that in the first season. I think once he splits off, you kind of get, when he's working for the FWD, which we haven't really gotten into, right. When he leaves the DWL, you kind of see a different side of him, especially when we get into some cross-promotional stuff. But in the first season, it does kind of come out of nowhere, but then that goes into kind of what I was saying, is I wonder if they thought that was going to be the end of the series and they were just trying to get as much in as possible.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing we didn't mention, David James Elliott as Tom King Spade was also the lead in Jag, which I didn't realize that, but I bet, folks, I bet your grandmother knows that, because, man, Jag is, isn't that the rep that show got, was that all the older folks enjoyed watching Jag?
I just remember there's an episode of King of the Hill where Hank is trying to have some alone time with Peggy, and I think one of the lines is like, I taped Jag. And that's, for whatever reason, that's what I always think of. Looking at this picture of him and Jag, I think he should always rock the stash.
Yes.
Good stash is Tom King Spade.
I know, right?
He looks great. Like, as far as, like, if you're going to have, like, a late 80s, early 90s villain type character, they kind of nailed that with the casting, because Tom Spade looks like someone believable as a heel. He kind of has the Rick Rude thing going.
Well done. Yeah. And I said the name Mike O'Malley. Mike O'Malley is actually Charlie Gully. And I'm going to tell you something, man. You talk about stealing the show every time this dude's on camera. Mike O'Malley crushed it. Like, he is slimy. He's skeevy. He's a dirtbag. But then he's well-spoken. He's charming. When you hear him talk to the talent, it doesn't feel like he's working them necessarily. Like, and then his daughter loves him. I love, dude, that there's a duality to this character that we've only begun to scrape the tip of the iceberg with him, man.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's only kind of sleazy when it comes to professional wrestling, up into these points throughout these 2 seasons. And this is more of like a pet project. He loves wrestling, but this is like a pet project because the guy is already loaded, right? So he's kind of like a money guy, and this is like his sad thing, because we see him like having private helicopters fly in and like Lambos in the driveway and these huge pool parties and obviously trying to overpay talent. And I'm trying to think, I mean, outside of the money thing, as far as wrestling goes, he is kind of a combination of a Vince Russo, Paul Heyman, right? That's what they're going for.
Yeah.
But then you throw the money in there, and it's like, and also, like you said, the other things of like, he's well loved by his family. Like there seem to be some roster people at his company that really like the guy. For whatever reason, he just does not like them. The country bumpkins up in DWL as the villain New Yorker.
Yeah. He's great. And the FWD is Florida Wrestling Dystopia. I can't say I'm in love with the name, but it doesn't matter because they basically are ECW on crack. Like, it's, I mean, they get the point across fairly quickly why Jack doesn't care for this. And then you have the bit with Ace going down there and he wants to sign him. And dude, when he talks to Ace, like, he's never a scumbag. I mean, of course he wants him, but like, they don't really need him. They're doing okay. But like, he goes out of his way to court him. And like, man, it just goes to show you that like, when it comes to those old carnies and those guys who they've always got the promoter's hats on. I mean, that's him for sure.
Yeah. And I think he nailed it with his portrayal of the character. Especially towards the end of season 2. Because he starts going even harder with this carny act of like, hey, if you can get her to come over, I can also get you a job.
Yeah.
He becomes that guy. A funny thing, there is this bar. It used to be called Wild Bill's. They would do like UFC fights, and big country musicians would come through, and they would have like 80s acts like Skid Row and stuff come through. And it's in Gwinnett, Georgia, which is about 10 minutes away from me. In downtown Gwinnett, near Pleasant Hill. Actually, if you're from Georgia, you'll kind of know where I'm talking about. Probably even know the place. But that's where all of the FWD arena footage is shot. Which was just kind of a neat thing if you're a local. So if you're in Georgia and you want to go see the FWD arena, that is just Wild Bill's, which I found pretty interesting.
That's nice. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, he's like I said, he's great, man. We did mention Kelly Berglund as Crystal Tyler. This is another character who really got rounded out, and she could have been flat. She could have been very, very flat, and she wasn't. They took the time to breathe life into her character, which I loved. And the fact that they had her, and we were going to try and spoil anything, kids, but earmuffs if you don't want to know. But they have her win the championship and, called an audible in the ring in the end of season 1. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, this is nuts. But dude, she's believable. I could picture her in any ring on TV right now. I mean, I thought she was great.
She was really great, and kind of the relationship between her and Ace is a fun little thing because she ends up falling for the Texas overall biggest baby face on the show. which is great. Which is Terry Tucker, who's been in a bunch of movies and stuff as well. We'll get into him, I guess, a little, as Bobby Pinn, who is just a very confused, very green rookie wrestler who ends up being kind of her love interest towards the end, which I thought was kind of great, because I was really worried that they were just going to continue on the story of her and Ace Spade, the on again, off again, because once again, the show does have vibes of Friday Night Lights, and they do that in Friday Night Lights, and I was really worried that they were going to go down that path, which can get very dull. But that was kind of a fun story arc, and it was great to see her get the big W, and then kind of see how she reacts when they realize we just put the belt on someone that's like 5'8", weighs 150 pounds, and there's no other women that work at this company. And then you get into more of the backstage stuff, like you were talking about, Tom, the booking elements of like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And honest, I'm gonna be straight with you. For me, taking her back down the road of hooking up with Ace again, in my opinion, is lazy. I think it's much more interesting to see them develop affection for each other from a distance. That's not necessarily love, but it's more of mutual respect, which no one thought they'd ever have for Ace, but he really does come around in season 2. I think that relationship, in my opinion, is much more interesting. That dynamic is much more fun to watch than seeing them take each other's clothes off in the spur of the minute and breaking Bobby's heart. I just don't know. That to me is more soap opera than anything else.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think that, Ace Ace pulling his inner Graham Parsons and rolling out to the desert or whatever he was doing,
right?
And kind of being humbled and coming back and creating vision boards and just telling Bobby Pinn, like, hey, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you guys. Like, I think that was more interesting than if they just did the, well, let's just put them back together and break old Bobby's heart, which would have been the common thing to do in one of these shows, especially, like I said, if you are doing the comparison between this and like a Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And Trey Tucker as Bobby is fantastic. He seemed like a real person. None of these folks really seem, I don't know, they all kind of feel like they belong, which, a lot of that, man, is it's all very subjective. Some people could watch this show and hate it from the first and never watch it again and think the cast is horrible. But I don't know, with my set of eyes, as I look at this cast together, the more I see them, I just don't get, I get put off by the directions at times in the dialogue, but I don't get put off by, I don't see any chemistry. I don't feel that a bit. This feels like a real pro wrestling locker room full of real people, man. It does to me. I get that from end to end every time I watch this show, for sure. Mary McCormick, who's also backstage as Willie Day. There are moments when it's too much for me in season 2 because she and Stacy, who is Allison Luff, that's Jack's wife, kids. There's moments when it's like, Allison Luff's character is Stacy. There are so many times in season 2, for example, when she's trying to dig into these hidden books, dig into what's really going on. And Willie's trying to warn her, you don't want to know these things. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, I'm with Willie. I don't know if you want to know these things. Like, no one's tearing down the door of this place. The cops aren't after you. The mob's not looking for a loan payback. No one's threatening the family. It kind of felt like, Chris, there should have been that kind of stuff that would cause her to want to go dig through the books. But it kind of felt like they weren't in any real danger, so to speak. So, like, why is she losing so much sleep over that? That is one plot line that it got frustrating for me in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, she is written as the lawfully good character if you're into Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, she's supposed to be the end-all, be-all baby face or good guy of this show. So even something like a passing of the envelope would draw her eyebrows up. We kind of saw that in the first season when she kind of figured out the Kleenex purchases and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was a little too soon because they already kind of had a big story going to also throw this on top of it. And I guess we will see. Hope if we get a season 3, what the payoff is for that is going to be, because it did not look good, because you do get Mary McCormick kind of going, just throwing her hands up and be like, "You want to know? I'll tell you," and then she kind of throws it all out there, which left us with a cliffhanger.
Very true. Yeah, I kind of felt like she's being a Karen through this, like trying to get to the truth. I'm like, leave it alone, man. I don't.
Yeah,
it was weird.
I don't know that you necessarily want to dig too much into the truth in an indie company at a.
Yeah,
wrestling. You dig into the books too hard. Like, you start digging into Paul Heyman's books in like '97. I don't know that you're gonna get the answer you're looking for.
Well, the Tommy Dreamer has always said, he said, Paul lied to the talent, never lied to the fans. He'd always lie to the talent. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't lose a lot of sleep over it, but that is one of the things that kind of, at any given time, I didn't care for. Robbie Ramos as Diego Cottonmouth. This guy is awesome. Does not look like a pro wrestler. Doesn't sound like a pro wrestler. He's masked up the entire time. But the relationship between him and Wild Bill is great. I mean, Diego is becoming like the podcaster guy, and they're working together on this podcast show for Wild Bill. I love that he got fleshed out in season 2. And again, Chris, like season 1 of any show, let's introduce the characters. Hopefully we get a season 2. You get a season 2, then you can begin fleshing out more than just the top star. You can begin fleshing out the ancillary cast, which is what we got here. But I thought Robbie Ramos as Diego Cottonmouth was awesome too.
Yeah, and it also plays into the over, like I said, kind of the redemption story or the redemption arc of Wild Bill Hancock. As Robbie Ramos, like you said, Diego Cottonmouth is like, I just don't want to work with you. You're just using me, kind of. And you get like some great moments there where he's like, no, it's not really like that. You know what I mean? Like, which plays into Wild Bill's character. And I think they did a great job of, like them going to the fan convention together. That's another wrestling thing that we got to see throughout the show. So that's one of those small things that if you are like a big wrestling fan, it is cool to see, like, while Bill's having interactions with people he hasn't talked to in forever, and he's seeing like what life could have been like if he stopped wrestling, which plays into his relationship with Diego Cottonmouth and him telling the stories on this podcast, which I think is a very interesting thing. If they do get a season 3, it'd be fun to get almost like a Talking Dead type thing, but like kayfabe.
Yeah.
with their
that would
podcasts.
be fun. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, 1,000 minutes long or whatever, but like a 10 to 15 minute thing. I think that would be really fun.
Oh my God. I can see that in my head. Give him a set like the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That'd be fun. Like have Diego be like a man, am I dating myself with Carson? I think I just did. Oh my God. Should I have said Fallon or Kimmel?
I don't know, but I did not grow up watching Carson, but I will implore you that now that it's out on Peacock, every episode, it is worth going back and watching. There are some funny Carson episodes. If you just want something to fall asleep to, it's fun. He's
underrated by this generation anyway. I will blame Spade and Carvey because I was listening to their podcast earlier today and they were talking about him. So that's what I'll use as my excuse. I'd be here for that, man. I love the work shoot kind of thing, especially for comedy's sake. I think that'd be fun, dude. I'd be here for that.
Yeah, and with every big show doing it anyways, at least this would be a fun way to get to talking about the episode.
Yeah. There's I don't know if you check out Only Murders in the Building. So it's a fun little show. But they've got one that's like afterward on the streamer, and it's not great. It's just not great. There's no host, there's no it's just they just random cast members doing random things. I'm like, this sucks. What a wasted opportunity for a great little post show for this show. But yeah, I'd be here for that. You mentioned Punk. We've talked about Punk a little bit. AJ's here. I am a little more than surprised, Chris, that we did not get a smattering of wrestlers. Although I will say that I did see, and I'm trying to remember what name he goes under in the NWA, but I saw him on several episodes. He was The Miz's stuntman. Why am I blanking on his name?
Oh,
Aaron Stevens.
Yes, I was thinking of his WWE name, which, yeah, you got it.
I've blanked on that too.
They had like a couple of people throughout, specifically some TNA guys here and there, kind of pop in and out. In the first season, when they're showing footage for FWD, because WWE owns the video rights to ECW, they actually end up using a lot of footage from TNA when they're showing the so like Samoa Joe and Abyss have a cameo.
That's right. Show. You're totally right. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. I did see Nick Aldis in some of those scenes too. Did you catch him?
Damian Sandow.
That's it.
Yes, I did catch him. That's another little fun thing, which they have been bringing in, much like we saw with Glow. They've been bringing in people to help with some of the in-ring work and choreography that they're trying to do for some of these scenes. So I'm not surprised when they actually put those guys in episodes as well. You know, like you might as well. They're there. You can always use them as like a third or fourth person, just kind of there hanging out.
Sure. And this totally just popped into my head. Random reference of something I had completely forgotten about. Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast, tackles one of the most popular and critically acclaimed series of our time, bringing together three hosts from two different parts of the world. Two Nations reviews all 3 seasons of Ted Lasso, 34 episodes total, with wrap-up episodes coming at the end of each season. Follow the show on social media at Two Nations Pod, and be sure to subscribe and download on all the major platforms. Just look us up, Two Nations Podcast. I don't know how many years ago it was, but someone reached out to me, a producer, billed himself as a producer, that he had written this pilot for this TV show. This is no BS. And I actually looked him up, and he was legit. I looked him up, and I asked a couple of different people if they knew him, and they said yes. And the opinion of him wasn't great, but that he was in the business. And he had found my name somehow, wanted me to read this script. This is a true story, for this first episode. God, I wish I'd saved it. I don't think I saved it. Wanted me to read the script for this first episode. And I'm going to tell you something, brother. It was bad. It was very bad. Like, if you can read a script and think that it's not going to work and you're not an actor and never done it in your life, dude, his portrayal of scenes from a pro wrestling standpoint, they were just really, really bad. So I sent it back to him and rewrote several. There's no BS. Rewrote several pages, and he wasn't thrilled. But I was honest, and I said, look, the scenes where the guy, this is not how we would talk to each other. This is not how anyone would talk to each other. And he didn't know. He didn't know. So he was asking. And he kept in touch for a little bit and said, I'm gonna add you as a producer on the project, get you a credit. And I'm like, all right. Nothing ever came of it. I'm not surprised. It's fine. But yeah, like, there's something to be said, Chris, for bringing in experts, whether it's a pro wrestling show or a show about the Army or a show about firefighting. You need guys on the set that can say, all right, hold on, we would never do that. I think it's important for the realism of the show here, man.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I mean, I guess having Stephen Amell there doesn't hurt, as someone who has done some wrestling training and has a lot of friends in the business. I mean, that's the one caveat to the show getting canceled, is he does have kind of some outs. Maybe he could trade some in-ring time to make help get himself on a network. What else are they showing on TNT? Like the original Black Panther?
Ooh. Hey, you never can tell, man.
Maybe this is going to become a WBD joint or whatever. But yeah, it is. I think it's very important. I mean, you see this in all the time with, like you said, military movies specifically. Anytime there's like a sniper scene in a military movie, they bring people in, because that is going to be one thing people are going to criticize to pieces. And there's even YouTube channels that specifically break down sniper scenes and stuff. Like,
oh, wow.
With real snipers, of like, hey, would this shot even be possible? Would this be how you would go about lining up that shot? You have like a trained sniper talking about breaking that stuff down. I'm sure that they're going to start doing it. It's not that far-fetched as many wrestling shows as we're starting to get, whether it's this or, well, I guess The Wrestlers on Netflix is more of a documentary series, but You kind of already see this in wrestling. You got Stevie Richards out here breaking down botches now
Right.
on YouTube. So how far are we going to be from people doing that on TV shows anytime there's any kind of wrestling?
Yeah. I mean, and plus, Chris, we're talking about our fan base here that full of a lot of wackadoodles that lose sleep over a lot of weird, goofy stuff. So there's always that to contend with.
I'm actually surprised that the show did not get... I don't know if it's because Stephen Amell is like the main character, but this show did not get a lot of that. I'm surprised. I actually expected kind of more of a certain subculture of wrestling fan, because I don't want to put everyone in that, but they kind of just hate everything.
Yeah.
This show did not get as much criticism as I thought it would, as far as like stuff going on in the ring.
Yeah, and you know what? That maybe goes back to our point of it being on Stars, and Stars isn't huge.
Yeah, but that subculture seems to find a way to watch anything without a streaming service or paying for a pay-per-view or...
Yeah, you make an excellent point. Yeah. You just shot my point all to pieces, but you're right. Yeah, you're totally right. By the way, kids, everybody relax. See, they'll get mad about that. You see what I'm saying? Like, they'll get mad about the fact that we point out how they are.
Well, they can get mad at me. I mean, at Chris R. Patton on Twitter. I'll make sure to read those comments and respond to you.
I learned years ago, never read the comment section. It doesn't matter. I would write a column on the 7, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, the 7 best heels of all time. And it never failed. 10 people, the one of them would go, that's a great list. Here's mine. And he'd write 1,000 words in the comment section. And I'm like, brother, if you want to go get your own blog, go get your own blog. Why are you doing this to my comment section? Like what?
Another one we'll have to do in the future is Cassandro. Speaking of heels, recently, because I was thinking about that. Have you seen that, Phil?
No.
It's on Amazon Prime. It is about the Mexican wrestler Cassandro and him being kind of a exotico wrestler, which is like a drag wrestler in Mexico. But he was one of the first openly gay Mexican wrestlers, and they go into that. And so it's a really good story. Maybe something we can cover in the future.
This is starting to ring a bell. I think I've seen a trailer somewhere. This is starting to sound familiar. Interesting.
But the in-ring work on that is in comparison to heels.
Yeah. Is it bad?
Not as good.
All they need, Chris, are those big loud sound effects. They'll be fine.
This was more of it's more of like if you just had all of like Goldust's hand gestures, but no actual movement in the ring. For the most part. For most of the matches, they tie a nice ribbon around it at the end, but
it might be something worth checking out. I think one of the few cast members we haven't mentioned is Alice Barrett Mitchell, who plays Carol Spade, Jack and Ace's mother. I got opinions on this chick, man. This character in season 2, she's still grieving, for one thing. She's bitter as all get out. And I'm going to be honest with you, she's having conversations with Ace at the kitchen table, who's trying to better himself and trying to be a better person and a better man. And I'm sitting there listening to these conversations like, you need to get away from her. Because, brother, she drags him down, man. There's moments when they're talking, I'm like, this sounds like real people. This sounds like real people that have been in my life before, that I'm like, yep, you're toxic. I mean, your son is actually trying to be a good person for once in his life, not care about just himself. And yeah, that's another thing I appreciate about the show, Chris, was that these characters are so effed up. Like, again, when Tom killed himself, he left behind a mess. And these folks have never dealt with it. They don't go to counseling. They don't even go to a church to talk about it. They just keep it inside and they act out. And Ace acts out the worst of the three of them because he's the one that found him. And it's, oh man, I appreciate that about the show, put it that way.
We do get the great scene with Ace and Jack in season 2 talking to each other kind of for the first time about their dad. Mm-hmm. And that's given to you at least, which I think is a lot of, I mean, it's the South. We don't talk about anything. No. It's not how we were raised, Tom.
That's true. You're right.
But that's part of what they're portraying in the show, which gives it those Friday Night Lights vibes, like I was saying. But yeah, as far as like the worst person on, like biggest heel on the show,
right,
or biggest bad guy on the show, she comes off that way. The acting's great. Like,
yeah.
That's the character she's set to portray, right? But
Sure.
I mean, in season 1, she straight tells her grandson that, Jack Spade's in hell because he killed himself, which is something if you grew up in the South, if you grew up around Baptists, that is something they will say about someone who committed suicide.
Yeah.
So they play into that, and obviously Ace is still living with her, so he has been dealing with that. They've not dug too much into their relationship together, but you do see that play out when he's trying to better himself in season 2. And she's great in that role, but it also makes her so hateable. You just want to reach through the TV and give her a good slap.
Oh man, you're totally. And by the way, you're right. She's 100% great in this. It's awesome. Yeah. It just feels so real. And man, talk about Ace's arc. He's volunteering in that home, and when that old man dies in that bed, dude. Again, I got emotional. I'm like, I'm feeling this guy's journey. I'm feeling that he's wanting to change. They did a great job with that character, man.
Yeah, minus the gimmick name that they give him. We'll
Sure.
leave that for people who haven't seen the show. I'm going to leave that one out there so they'll
right
be able to get a good laugh about it.
That's fair. But yeah, I season 2 just got a lot better. Again, there are moments of the soapboxing stuff, especially when Jack's kid gets in a fight in school, and halfway through them talking to the principal, it started feeling like this is no longer about this show. This sounds like a Trumper talking. Hey, look, I'm just saying it. I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where my head went. So I don't know.
I kind of agreed with maybe I don't think this makes me a Trumper per se, but I kind of agreed with sometimes people just need to get hit in the face, which was the end conversation of that scene.
Yeah, maybe Trump was too harsh.
Yeah, maybe that is just that is not the right reaction, but I could see why growing up the way that he grew up, that would be the reaction. So I actually thought it fit the character well.
I've told my son numerous times, if you ever get in a fight at school, if you are defending yourself, you'll never get in trouble with me, ever. I don't care if they suspend you. You won't get grounded. You won't get punished. I won't take anything away. But if you started to fight, we got a problem.
Yeah, I guess that's where it kind of falls through the cracks, because he's kind of starting a fight because of kayfabe.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, that they're, but I think they're the actual line. Some people deserve to be hit in the face. I think that can ring true depending on who the person is and what they did to you.
Well, that's fair. I got a list if you ever want to hear it. We'll be here a while. People who have wronged me. My enemies shall suffer one day.
You got the Sheldon Big Bang Theory mortal enemies list going on over there.
Yes. Oh, man. I got to hit the Big Bang on the 6M one day. Never covered that show. That'd be fun. Speaking of titles, kayfabe. Here are the episode titles, kids. There's season 1. Kayfabe, Dusty Finish, great name. Cheap Heat, Cutting Promos, Swerve, House Show, The Big Bad Fish Man, Double Turn. Season 2, 10 Bell Salute, The Journey is the Obstacle, Discord, Heavy Heads, Who the Hell is the Condemned, Appearances, The Things That Matter, and High Flying. By the way, we didn't mention the Condemned. I hate the name. I hate it. It's horrible. It's terrible. And that's why it's a pro wrestling thing. You know what I mean? Because it's goofy. So
I was trying to avoid saying it so that if anyone hadn't seen the transformation of a specific gimmick, but yeah, it's out there in the title name.
Yeah, I can't help it. I know we were going to leave it off the table. I can't help it. It just came out, and
it's so bad. It's so great, but it's so bad because it is just such a silly wrestling thing. Yeah. Especially with the overall package, it is.
Yeah. It's so goofball. Yes, it's so goofball. I'm gonna dye my hair black and put on black paint. Like, it's supposed to be like a Sting thing. I will say this: when the lights come back up and he's sitting on the top turnbuckle behind Gully, I popped legit like I was watching a wrestling show. I did pop for that.
Yeah,
I was
me
like,
too.
that's pretty good.
Like the 10 Bell Salute episode is well named because it is playing. It is, if I remember correctly, that's a backstory episode, right?
I think so.
That's
yeah.
where you get into more of Jack. I will say that the season 2 does play more into the story of Jack Spade and Wild Bill Hancock than it does the current cast from season 1. And I think that is for the actual better, because fleshing out how the company started and why these people have these various relationships that are in Ace's life become really important.
It does. And I don't want, again, we gave away some stuff, but I think we could probably fantasy book episode 1 of season 3, maybe all of season 3 right now if we wanted to, because they left season 2 on such a cliffhanger with what happens with, Jack in the ring, which, by the way, is kind of nuts. And I think obviously it was a play on the, I guess I'll give it away here. A play on the Brock Lesnar Kurt Angle match, I suppose, I guess is what they were going for. But I thought the landing looked fine. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. So
yeah, that was my problem. I was like, what how?
Yeah, how? Yeah.
If you're able to get over, then on that rotation, you should be fine. I can see you messing your knee up.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like you're trying not to squash the guy. Maybe you tear ACL or something. But yeah, the only way to really snap your neck on that is to have the exact experience Brock had versus Kurt Angle, which is you just did not get the rotation all the way there, bud.
Oh, it's still scary to watch.
Kurt saved his life.
He did.
Which is insane. But yeah, it is scary to watch. And but there's a million different moves to kind of set up that same thing, if but they went with the shooting star. So
yeah. And then plus we got the stuff with Wild Bill that you suspect, oh my God, something's happening. You know what I mean? And I'm like, dude, please tell me this is not what I think it's going to be. So
kind of felt like a Jerry the King Lawler wrestling situation, or Mick from Rocky, for those who aren't wrestling fans, situation.
Yeah, geez. So again, I not everyone has to be screwed up, kids, but I love that there are flawed characters in this show. But there's this thing about, and look, I watched every episode of The Sopranos. I watched every episode, binged the entire show within the matter of a month and a half, give or take. Okay. So I've been there and done that. But was Tony Soprano a better man on the end of the last episode than he was the first one? No, he was not. In my opinion, he didn't change at all. In my opinion, I haven't seen the show in a while. Okay. I don't care for that. I don't care for flawed characters who remain flawed. I need there to be more than just static characters, Chris. I've said this before on the 6M 1,000 times if I said it once. I need there to be evolution. I need there to be character development. And that this show on Heels feels as though these characters are truly evolving and they're going to become better or maybe worse, but they're not going to be the same as the first time we laid eyes on them. And I think those kind of shows are much more entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why they left at least for Tony Soprano as a character, that's why they left the ending so open. Because if the person's never going to become that, if he's never going to try to change or become a better person, then you at least want to see him get his comeuppance, right?
Yeah.
So they gave you that on the finale.
That's true. That's a good call. Yeah.
And other people do, not to go on a tangent about the Sopranos, but other people do become better people throughout that show. Just
That's
not
true.
Tony. Tony is just always going to be Tony.
And, again, that show's regarded by some folks as the best show of all time. And, it is what it is. I watched every episode and, it's been a while. But we mentioned Ted Lasso, I think, off the air, but, that is a great example of a show in which every character, with the exception of one, every character undergoes some sort of personal transformation. And it only takes 3 seasons. But by the end of season 3, if you watch the season 3 episode versus the season 1 episode, you'd see and recognize the characters, but you'd be like, whoa, what happened? Because every character, with the exception of one, undergoes either a pretty much positive change because they're growing, they're getting better, they're evolving, they're learning. Like, I feel like, Chris, sometimes that's where TV loses its way, is because they're hammering out so much content at once that they feel like they got to give you a character, and that, well, we've been greenlit for season 8. Awesome. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm tired. When's this going to end? Like, even on the shows that I love, I don't necessarily want it to end, but it's like, when is this character going to get to where it needs to be? Do you know what I mean?
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, we've seen that with, How I Met Your Mother, for instance.
Yes.
Right? It just continued to go. And granted, there was still some funny stuff here and there, but that's a great example of that. I think, of like, look, you've told us every story you can tell us with 4 people, pretty much. So let's wrap it up, B. That happens, and I think it just depends on the type of show. Obviously, with something like The Sopranos, there's the mindset of, we don't want to mess with it too much because it's working so well.
Yeah.
That'd be like if you went in and you're like, okay, it's time to turn Hogan Hill, but it's 1986.
Oh.
You get what I'm saying? Like, if you can tweak something too much, that's the other side. That's what a lot of shows tend to do now, especially like the shows like a lot of the CW shows, for instance, like Vampire Diaries or the originals. They will shift the characters dramatically from season to season, which I think is also not necessarily the best way to handle it. This has a little bit of a good mix, and I think it has a lot to do with just the underlying element that it's related to wrestling. So they're slowly shifting characters between baby faces and heels throughout the show, if that makes sense.
It does.
There's almost like a booking philosophy in what they're doing, and maybe it's just because it's about wrestling that it's more noticeable, but they also do the same kind of thing on, like, I keep coming back to it, but Friday Night Lights, the TV show, you have kind of a shift of various characters throughout, and you don't necessarily need a character to become evil for them to have character development. And I think that's another big problem in TV, is you can go too far with it, right? Mm-hmm. But there should be something that's always happening where that character's either becoming a better person or has something interesting going on. So yeah, I agree with you, but I think there's caveats to it.
And I hadn't really thought about it till you mentioned it, but this show does have the feel of a pro wrestling formula in which the characters are. Yeah, I don't know if I ever made that connection, but that's well spotted. I like that quite a bit. I like Stephen Amell. I don't want to wrap this up with people thinking I enjoy him. I thought the night he jumped the rail and got into the ring against Cody was fantastic. I thought he looked freaking great. That crowd lost its mind for him. I thought the stuff he did in AEW was very fun. I like him. There's moments when I'm questioning things, but that's from the standpoint of a guy that's never met him, and just sound bites that you hear. And he made the comments when he did during the writer's strike, which is very uncomfortable, and maybe he should have kept that to himself. And but overall, I enjoy this show, and I think I think that the dynamic between him and his brother, between Jack and Ace, is great. And I think that's the driving force of the show. And I think you should never deviate from that. You can change things. They can change. Other characters can come up and get big and get over, so to speak. But the dynamic of the brothers needs to work. Is that, in your opinion, is that what makes this show work overall? Are the two of them together? Or is it just the whole cast as a total?
Ooh, that's tough. Mm-hmm. I would say in the second season, it's the whole cast overall. In the first season, it's definitely the dynamic between the two brothers.
Right.
But the second season is more of the Ace redemption story, and him and his brother having kind of a closer relationship. So there's just not as much friction there, as there was previously. So that's, I don't know. We only have 2 seasons. Normally, when you're talking about a show, as far as like all encompassing, it's a little easier because you have more to go off of. But I could see the argument being made for both. I mean, I think the two people that I kind of draw my attention to the most would be Crystal and Wild Bill. And Wild Bill and Jack Spade's relationship almost mirror Ace and his brothers.
Oh, nice. I like that.
So because you kind of have Ace Spade ready to get out of there. He's done. You have Wild Bill like, hey man, why are you leaving? We can make this thing together. they kind of mirror each other. So maybe that's why I think that, both those characters are important. And then Crystal, I think, is important because she's kind of the underdog of the entire show that you want to root for. So I think it's a combination of things, but you could get rid of some of these other characters, and as long as you have Stephen Amell and Alexander Ludwig, I think you would be okay, because you tell the story of brother versus brother for forever.
Oh yeah, it's a timeless. Yeah, you're right. It's a timeless story. It's a trope, but it's a timeless story for sure. I want to see this show come back, dude. I do. How many years let's say it does get greenlit. And again, kids, by the time you listen to this, maybe it will be back on. So go enjoy. But let's say it does come back, Chris, or in your opinion, 2 more years, maybe 3, maybe. Do you think it could catch lightning and really keep going? Or in your opinion, how many more years to tell this story if you had to take a guess?
When this show first started, I was kind of thinking that you could wrap up the entire story in 4 seasons, much like you would with most HBO shows. So I would say 4 seasons. And that kind of seemed like where they were heading, because you would think that the next season would be kind of the end of the FWD feud. Maybe one of these 2 companies are going to get television rights of some sort, or streaming rights, which is kind of the build up, and then the 4th season would be wrapping everything up with a pretty bow and sending it out happy, because this is that's kind of the Starz HBO Cinemax, like back in the day, 4 or 5 seasons and you're out. Now there's some, like The Sopranos went longer than that. There's a few shows that went longer than that, but they kind of always stick in that wheelhouse of 3 or 4 seasons and then we're done.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'm with you. I don't know if 3 is enough. Because 3, you would imagine, would be, as you said, the battle for the rights and what happens to Jack in the end of last episode of season 2, and then 4 would be the one to begin putting a bow in there. That's a good call. I think I'd be here for that. I mean, I'd like to see the show come back, man. I don't know. We'll see. I do enjoy it overall, honestly, and I think it's been fun. I'd like to watch it again. Doing this show makes me want to watch it again. So, wherever you are out there, get the freaking show back, man, because, dudes like us want to watch it again. What are we doing here? So, yeah, hopefully it comes back. Do you see more, in your opinion, of this type of format? Because these wrestling shows, man, there's the new one on the OVW, which I have not watched, by the way, but I hear it's great. Do you think we'll keep just going down this road? Do you think the major networks will get involved at some point? There's the show about The Rock growing up, so it's getting everywhere. What do you think? Are we going to keep doing this?
Well, I mean, that show got canceled, so hopefully they don't go the wayside of that. But it was also ridiculous.
It was.
To the point where it could almost be offensive if you were a wrestling fan who knew anything about who would be in what territory, where, and when.
Yeah.
I think there's... The problem is the same thing with comics or Westerns. There's oversaturation, right? So you need to make sure that whatever you're putting out is actually worth watching. Where I think Hills is worth watching. We do have, Dark Side of the Ring. We have the A&E biographies. We have everything the WWE is putting out on the network biography wise. How much room is there for another fictional show like the Heels? Is that the question, or are you talking about just wrestling content in general on various streaming services?
Well, but I'm thinking more along the lines of a show. Do you think we'll see something like this on a CBS at one point? Anything like that?
Maybe it's going to be on NBC with these specials. They're going to do a TV. No, I'm kidding. I don't know, man, because telling the story of a wrestling company in general would be hard on network television.
Yeah, that's true. And it takes a long time.
It's got to be also kind of expensive.
Yeah.
to be honest. I don't know. If this show does get picked back up and does well, and wrestling continues to go through the boom period that it's currently going through, and we don't add another show that's 3 hours from one of these wrestling companies, then maybe. Because the thing is if your target audience right now is wrestling fans, for this kind of show. And obviously you want the show to be seen by more people than just wrestling fans, which I think is why you kind of have like the Friday Night Lights feel of this show. The problem is like your core audience, if they watch everything that's wrestling, even if they only watch the two main promotions, you're already dedicating 10 hours to your life on wrestling just through the main shows. So that's what I'm talking about when we speak of oversaturation. There's going to be people like me that's just going to try to watch as much of it as possible because they're huge wrestling fans and that's what we love to do. But if the thing is putting it on a major like network like a CBS or a Fox as a primetime TV show, it becomes a little harder because you know you're going to lose some of the audience. And we saw that with the Young Rock. They're like, hey, it's The Rock. Yeah, but it's also a show about wrestling, and do wrestling fans want to take the hour to watch, Young Rock, or do they want to watch Impact? So you kind of get thrown into that. You have to make decisions. I mean, I have to do that now with certain shows that are just straight professional wrestling, that aren't like a dramatic version of what that should be. So I think that's kind of the problem with it. And how big that market is, which it's been big. It's bigger right now than it has been in a very long time.
I mean, thank God for DVR. I don't know if I guess I still call it DVR, but like my TV is Hulu. I gave up cable and satellite a long time ago, so my main TV is Hulu. But like, thank goodness for the recordings because I often don't watch Dynamite till like the night after or 2 nights after sometimes, depending on how busy I am. So yeah, I feel you.
And I mean, we've also seen shows like Glow get canceled, which were critically acclaimed, which is similar to Heels. I mean, obviously it's based on a real life company, but it was a very similar type of show.
That's true. I guess at the end of the day, kids, it's whatever will make a network money is what they're going to spend money on. And honestly, a show about pro wrestling probably more expensive to produce than an actual pro wrestling show, because pro wrestling shows have really not been the most expensive shows to produce on television, and plus the ratings are pretty much guaranteed. And even for Impact, like people can sneeze at Impact ratings, but Impact ratings are probably consistent, even if the number is 500,000, whatever the number is. I don't know what the number is, but Chris, is probably consistent number every time they're on the air. Name another show that can consistently get. I mean, they'll hot shows will get cold eventually. But pro wrestling as a whole usually deliver on numbers, man, almost every time.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about the ratings of this show starting out. And granted, they're streaming numbers, so it's slightly different. But if you wanted to compare it to Impact, this show has not done a higher number than the current season at Impact.
There you go.
So it's one of those things. But it's also two different audiences that you're trying to mesh together. How do you find the way to do that? Right. And that's more the problem. I would just hate to see this show go by the wayside because, like I said, it's not like Starz has a ton of things that are better than this. I think they have Minx, Power, and all of the Power spinoffs, and then outside of that, like it's far down the list of good things they have on that streaming service in general. So I was very surprised to see it get canceled, even with maybe lower ratings than some of those other shows.
Same. Well, there you have it, kids. There's Heels. It's full of a bunch of stuff, full of some spoilers, and full of a little bit of hope at the end that maybe, just maybe, they'll figure this thing out. So, again, if and when they get this show back on the air, go, I was going to say purge. Coming back to the other remark. Go binge it. Go binge it and enjoy the show. And hopefully you will, and we'll see what happens in the future. Let's take this home, to use a pro wrestling term. Chris, give me your last word on Heels.
Great show. If you can find it anywhere to watch, or if you have to find it by illegal means since they took it off the air, go watch it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, totally agree. It's worth your time. Even if you're not a wrestling fan per se, I think you'll still get something out of it. And if nothing else, you'll get a peek into the world of pro wrestling. Look, you watch 1,000 cop shows out there, and you don't know anything about being a cop, but you still watch them and assume it's entertaining and they're doing it right. Trust me, this show gets it right more often than not when it comes to the pro wrestling stuff. Trust me. So it's worth your time. Go check it out if and when you can, and we'll see what happens in the future. In the meantime, that is Heels. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.